and they take the position that in light of 10 million people coming into our country in 3.5 years, you shouldn't have a requirement to demonstrate you're a citizen before you register as a new voter. Think of the positions the left now takes. It's crazy to defund the police. It's crazy not to have a border. It's crazy to say men should compete against women in sports. Those are all positions the left takes.
Imagine walking up to any random person on any street in America and asking them one simple question. Should someone have to prove they are a citizen before they register to vote? Any person, any neighborhood, any political background. You already know the answer they would give. So why are elected officials in Washington giving a completely different one? Stay with me until the end of this video, because what Jim Jordan said on the House floor is something every person who believes in this country needs to hear. And what happened after is something you will not forget. Like this video and subscribe before we go any further, because this is exactly the kind of content this channel was built for.
You go to any community, anywhere in this country, walk up to someone on the street and say, do you think it makes sense, in light of the fact that 10 million migrants have come into the country in 3.5 years, 99 of those individuals on the terrorist watch list, do you think it makes sense before a new voter registers to vote that they demonstrate they are a citizen of this great country? And any person you ask that question to will say, well, of course. Of course that makes sense. Everyone, Democrat district, Republican district, they will all say the same thing. Everyone will agree with that except Democrats in the United States House of Representatives. They disagree with that. They say, no, we can't have that requirement on a bill that spends what we're already spending. We can't put that requirement on a bill. That is ridiculous. That is, as Sarah Huckabee Sanders said a couple years ago in her response to the State of the Union, she said, the divide in America today is normal versus crazy. That is a crazy policy position not to agree with that, not to put the SAVE Act on this bill. Think of the positions the left now takes. It's crazy to defund the police. It's crazy not to have a border. It's crazy to say men should compete against women in sports. Those are all positions the left takes, and they take the position that in light of 10 million people coming into our country in 3.5 years, you shouldn't have a requirement to demonstrate you're a citizen before you register as a new voter. The people see this, man. The people understand in this country, this is a crazy, support this legislation. This is a good bill with a common sense, normal policy that we are putting on the legislature. Makes absolute sense, but they're going to vote against it. I urge a yes vote, and I yield back.
There are moments in politics that cut through all the noise, all the talking points, all the carefully rehearsed statements, all the political theater. And then there are moments where someone stands up and says exactly what millions of people have been thinking, but could not find the words for. What Jim Jordan delivered on the House floor over the SAVE Act was one of those moments. Now, before anyone dismisses this as partisan back and forth, let us slow down and actually look at what the SAVE Act is and what Jordan was arguing. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act would require individuals to provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote. That is it. That is the bill, not a removal of voting rights, not a restriction on legal voters, a requirement that a person confirm they are a citizen of the country whose elections they intend to participate in. Jordan walked up to that microphone and made it plain. He said, go to any community, walk up to anyone, Democrat district or Republican district, and ask whether it makes sense for someone to demonstrate citizenship before registering to vote. His point was that the overwhelming majority of Americans would say yes without hesitation. And here is what makes that argument land so hard. He is not wrong about that. Across multiple independent surveys, the idea of verifying citizenship before voter registration has consistently polled with strong support across party lines. This is not a fringe position. It is one of the few areas where a significant cross-section of the American public actually agrees. Yet the opposition to this bill inside Washington tells a completely different story. Chuck Schumer and the broader Democratic leadership pushed back hard against attaching this requirement to legislation. Jordan's response to that opposition was sharp. He framed the resistance not as a policy disagreement, but as a disconnect from the basic common sense that ordinary Americans operate with every single day. Now, as a commentator, I want to be fair here. The counter-argument from those who oppose the bill centers around a few things. They argue that non-citizens are already prohibited by law from voting in federal elections, and that there is no documented evidence of widespread non-citizen voter registration affecting election outcomes. They also argue that adding documentation requirements could create barriers for certain eligible citizens who may not have easy access to the specific documents required. Those are arguments that deserve to be acknowledged. But here is where the conversation gets genuinely important. The argument is not only about what the law already says. It is about what verification structure exists to enforce it. Laws without enforcement mechanisms are just words on paper. If someone who is not eligible to vote can register without any system in place to confirm eligibility, the law prohibiting it becomes theoretical rather than practical. Jordan's position is that the verification step closes that gap. It makes the law functional rather than decorative. And then he went further. He tied this to a broader pattern of policy positions that he argues have moved from unconventional to genuinely out of step with the majority of the country. He mentioned the debate over defunding law enforcement agencies. He mentioned the question of border security and the record number of border encounters that took place over roughly a 3.5-year stretch. He brought up the ongoing debate over biological males competing against biological females in athletic competitions. His argument was that these positions, taken together, represent a political direction that most Americans, when asked directly, would not support, whether you agree with his framing or not. There is something worth sitting with in that observation. Political parties in any healthy democracy are supposed to be responsive to the people they represent. When a significant and consistent gap develops between what leadership defends and what voters across different demographics actually believe, that is a signal worth paying attention to regardless of which side of the aisle it appears on. Jordan did not waver. He did not soften the language. He did not reach for a more diplomatic phrasing to make the opposition more comfortable. He stood on the principle that citizenship verification before voter registration is a reasonable, logical, and necessary step. He called it normal. He called the resistance to it crazy. And he urged a yes vote. For those who support this kind of directness in political leadership, what Jordan demonstrated was something that has become increasingly rare. He treated the people watching as adults who could handle a straight answer. He did not dress the argument up in layers of strategic ambiguity. He made the case, stated his position clearly, and stood behind it without apology. The question this debate ultimately puts on the table is one that goes beyond any single piece of legislation. It is a question about the relationship between law enforcement and public trust. Elections only work when the people participating in them trust that the outcome reflects the will of those who are actually entitled to participate. Anything that strengthens that trust is worth serious and honest discussion. Anything that weakens it, whether through lax verification or through unnecessary barriers, deserves scrutiny from every direction. That is where the real conversation should be happening, not in partisan attacks and not in political theater, but in a genuine examination of what it actually takes to protect the integrity of a process that the entire system depends on. Jim Jordan made his position on that question very clear. And whether you stand with him or you push back against him, the debate he sparked is one that every American who cares about this country should be engaged in.